there's, I think for people who aren't queer, the idea of coming out is this big one thing, and it's you're out. And it's no, I have to have this conversation with every person I meet.
And it's sort of you'll do a partial coming out, just take it a bit at a time.
Yeah. How do you feel about this? Cool, I'll come back in 2 weeks. Welcome to Queer Coded. We're currently remote today. My name's Emily.
My name is Eli, and we've got Duncan joining us here today. Duncan, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a software engineer and mentor at Northcoders. Yeah, just working day-to-day teaching students on the boot camp.
And what were your first awareness, your early intro to tech?
Good question. Very little, to be honest. Until a couple of years ago, my sort of image of what coding was just the matrix, black screen, green text. I had no idea. But yeah, so in terms of early influences, there aren't many.
I think the matrix is a really interesting one, though, because I feel like that was kind of a touchstone for a generation of sort of what the world of the internet and technology was. So I think that's a really pertinent example, definitely.
Yeah. Not just for coding, but for queer coding people as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's all about big long leather jackets and sunglasses.
Oh yeah, that's the queer agenda. So what was your path like before you got into coding, and what got you to this point?
So I used to work in the early years. So I worked in a nursery. It's very different to what I do now. Well, still sort of education related. But yeah, I just kind of was furloughed over lockdown, started messing about with stuff, saw some adverts for getting into coding, and found out that it was actually surprisingly easy to make a website.
Nice.
A lot more than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And yeah, it all kind of just snowballed.
Oh, fantastic. And was there anything that really stuck out to you as being super interesting? What was it specifically grabbed you and was oh, this is what I want to do?
It was definitely, I was just messing about on Free Code Camp, with the HTML stuff, and I think it's just make it writing stuff and seeing it actually appear on the screen.
And was there anything specific that drew you towards the Northcoders bootcamp over other boot camps?
I think a bit of word of mouth, friend of a friend had done it, but also when I actually started looking into it and reading up about Northcoders, just the sort of all the values and everything, and sort of resonated with me. It was just seemed like the right sort of place.
And in terms of sort of your personal career path, obviously you've told us a bit about that. Do you feel like there's anything about being LGBTQIA that's sort of drawn you into this career path?
I think a little bit, yeah, because in my old job, it wasn't outright, but there just wasn't as much acceptance of things. Especially from some of the sort of older generation, some of the parents that I dealt with. It was kind of I'm not sure I want to work in this environment.
I think that's fair. Definitely want to have a welcoming environment to work in.
Yeah.
Did you see that as a preemptive reason for wanting to come into tech? Did that specifically, that idea of being accepted somewhere, did that sway your decision into tech? Or was that a surprise?
It was. I think it wasn't the main factor, but it was definitely, like I say, just when I saw the sort of Northcoders values and that, I was a bit oh, this sounds all right. So it's sort of it was definitely a factor, but not a major one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the values that we sort of espouse on the website are definitely something that we really adhere to when we're in classes and throughout the boot camp. So I think it is really, I know it's something that drew me to doing the boot camp, seeing those values displayed there.
Yeah, I think for me, I was first introduced to Northcoders by a friend who's non-binary, and I think having someone who is queer recommend something to you, that's already kind of a stamp of approval. Because there are spaces where you kind of yeah, it's fine, but then someone's like says, "Oh, this is a LGBTQIA friendly place," it automatically makes me want to go there more than somewhere else.
Definitely.
Yeah, like I've had chats with a friend like, "Oh, where should I go to get my hair done?" And they're always like, "Oh, this place is really like queer friendly," and I'm like, "I'm in." Like that's all I needed to hear.
I can definitely recommend a barber in Ancoats.
That's too far.
Yeah, I know it's by. There's a barber called Riot Barber.
Okay,
I would recommend. That's where I got my mullet.
nice.
If you're watching Riot Barbers, sponsorship. Yeah, so I mean, are there any changes that specifically you would like to see, like in tech, in regards to like your queer identity?
Yeah, I've not really got much to say, to be honest, just because I've not really experienced much.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this already. Like, because we've kind of gone from Northcoders Bootcamp into working for Northcoders, it's very much like a bubble.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite hard to like comment on like what's going on in other companies. But I think just the idea that we know we're in a bubble is like indicative enough where we're kind of like, right, okay, that there is some things going on here because we know that this isn't not necessarily the norm, but the common like experience for like queer people in tech. Yeah.
I think sort of outside of being a queer person in tech as well, I think I know that there's definitely a lot that still needs to be done in terms of inclusivity with sort of accessibility and that side of things as well. And I think that that is something that I always really think about in a big way. Just sort of thinking about ways that we can make sure that our code is inclusive to everyone as we're writing it, and making sure that everyone can access as much of it as possible. Not necessarily a queer thing, but just in terms of inclusivity, I think maybe being in a minority kind of makes you think about the way that other minorities sometimes experience the world, which is, I think, really important.
Yeah, I know what you mean about like just kind of inclusivity in general and accessibility, that kind of thing. I don't know if you ever tried using like a screen reader. It's a very
I remember
makes you realise, doesn't it?
oh, it's impressive. It's
Yeah.
very impressive. I tried one for a second. If anyone's not tried one, it's so difficult. Like it's a serious thing you have to train with, and it goes like what 300 words a minute. It's
Wow.
yeah. When you hear it, you kind of like, okay, I hear like some words here, but there is. It would take a good few months to a year, I think, to even get remotely usable for me. So I have like huge respect for people who not only like need to use a screen reader but can use a screen reader. I think that's so impressive.
Yeah, it's really impressive, like how like what people can do. Because I was reading a bit about like a developer who was blind, like, and just codes like no screen, no nothing, just a keyboard and a computer
Wow.
and stuff like
That's
that. And
super
it's like
interesting.
it's really quite amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to like see some of that code, just to kind of say like, not like look for inconsistencies, but I mean just like because everyone has their own kind of coding style. Like regardless of like disabilities, it's more just it's a creative thing. So I would really like to see kind of how someone who doesn't have almost like the constraints of like formatters. I know that they'll probably still use like a formatter or a linter, but like having seen that like so often, you just kind of go, right, okay, well that's how that's supposed to be structured. I imagine.
Yeah, it's like how do you manage without bracket pair colorizer?
Oh god, that would be horrendous. Yeah.
Polarizer.
Yeah, I know. I've never even thought of that, but like stuff like that is like very much accessibility based.
Yeah, it's all visual, isn't it? And like,
Yeah, stuff.
so it's like,
Yeah, like it's kind of marketed as quality of life, but in a like a larger sense, like loads of that stuff was created for accessibility. Yeah, it's quite interesting when you think about it. Yeah, have you got any recommendations for extensions?
well, I don't think that bracket pair colorizer is an extension anymore. I think it's inbuilt to VS Code.
Yeah, they paused it over. Yeah.
I think it is.
I know I quite like my rainbow indent, just a bit more colour as well.
Nice.
Oh
Yeah, I've
yeah,
got that
I
as
saw
well.
that for the first time the other day, and it's so useful.
It is, yeah.
Like I know we're just kind of like descending into like, oh, what's your VS Code extension? Um,
I just thought we were
Indeed.
discussing accidentally slightly queer extension.
Accidentally gay code.
I don't need it for the accessibility. I just like the rainbow.
Yeah.
um, have you faced any accessibility issues with being non-binary, just in the general world, that you think you kind of like dumbfounded that they're still a thing?
I think it does take people a lot of like getting used to that kind of like idea of people being non-binary. Like I've not faced like massive difficulties. It's just the usual sort of like, people look at you and you're just kind of like, clearly it's a he kind of thing. Yeah, but to be honest, like from what I've found so far, most people are quite open to like, if you sort of open the conversation like a bit, they're sort of a bit more understanding. Like you do get your outliers, but yeah, it's been all right, I think.
Yeah, I think that's something we've touched on before with like
Yeah.
the trans experience in general. I know like you can't say like every trans experience is the same, but I think there is that definite thing of you start to kind of understand that like the best way to not like get respect from people, but there are people who are just kind of like, I don't get it, like I'm not even going to bother. But then you have that conversation with them, like, oh, you're a person.
Yeah. Like, it's just easier to let it slide. Like if you just want to
yeah,
avoid confrontation.
Yeah, I think that like that definitely depends on the day. I think for me anyway, sort of some days you can kind of be bothered to correct people when they use the wrong pronouns, and some days you're just like, do you know what? I'm just tired. I don't have the energy for this. I've got to go do something. But I think for me, I feel quite lucky that I've kind of passed from that point into a different point. But I feel like if you are non-binary, it is a lot of kind of having that conversation with people again and again, which I appreciate must be quite difficult.
Yeah, just like justifying your existence kind of every time you meet someone. It's that whole thing of like, there's, I think for people who like aren't queer, like the idea of coming out is like this big one thing, and it's like, you're out. And it's like, no, I have to have this conversation with every person I meet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it passes people by quite a lot. Yeah.
And it's sort of like you'll do like a partial coming out. Like just take it a bit at a time.
Yeah.
Like, let's just break this news first and then move on to that later.
How do you feel about this? Cool, I'll come back in 2 weeks. I'll just let that one settle in for a little bit, and then we'll see how you feel about this. No, definitely.
I did actually find that people are generally a lot more kind of on board with making the effort to do those things when you have that conversation. Though, as you say, Duncan, that sometimes there are certain outliers, but I think for me, if people get something wrong and then correct themselves, they've tried.
There's a big difference between sort of like making an error and knowing it, noticing it, and fixing it.
Yeah, definitely.
As opposed to like deliberately doing things. Yeah, big difference.
And definitely something that we can apply to coding as well there.
Yeah.
So in terms of the wider world, is there anything that you think you'd particularly like to change that would make the world a better place?
Like, well, this is something that's like it is sort of going on, but I do think can still be worked on. But it's kind of like something I've seen a lot just in the early years, just like because you are sort of required, like if you're working in the early years education, sort of like not have sort of stereotypes, like not stereotypical sort of things, and like avoid that kind of thing. Encourage like that toys are for everyone, that kind of sort of thing. But a lot of the sort of difficulties that we faced actually came from like the parents. So like the parents would, like the kids would pick up stuff from the parents and then come back in and sort of like bring that back into the nursery and start telling people not to play with girls' toys and things like that. And like boys with long hair, and it's just like it is getting there, but could do a speeding up a bit.
Yeah, it seems to be kind of more of a reactive thing as opposed to like a proactive thing. Because I know, especially like I was quite well supported when I came out, so like I know that pretty much 99% of the people around me were just kind of like, yeah, cool, great, super supportive. But then I would start to see people still applying like gendered things to like their kids around me, and I was just kind of like, I know that sounds like really entitled, and it's half is, but but like some of the stuff that like when I was a kid and I had like gendered things applied to me, like that really hurt me later on in life, and I'm just like, you don't know what this kid is going to turn out to be, and not gendering everything about this kid's life is not going to hurt them, but doing the opposite could potentially.
Yeah.
And it's just that kind of like, if you want to like say you're an ally and really push for like allyship and support kind of queer people in general, you have to be supporting them before you know that they're queer. And I think that's kind of like a big disconnect between the modern society as it is now. It's kind of like, as soon as you come out, it's almost like a badge of honor to be like, oh, I'm an ally. And it's like, okay, are you an ally to someone who has not even come out to you? Are you still like saying these things about people even if there's no queer people around? Like, are you advocating for minorities when the minorities aren't present? That kind of thing. And I think that does need to be not like pushed for more, but taught more, because I think it's only one of those things that until we teach how important that kind of thing is, no one's going to know.
Like, it's kind of that idea of like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks sort of thing. Well, I mean, you can, but it's difficult. But yeah, so sort of like having that in education when like people are young. It is in progress, but yeah, it's just small steps really.
I think you can definitely see like a societal change already though.
Yeah.
Like the more generation of children like I see, the more accepting they are. So I think that just kind of proves it is an education thing. Like these people are being exposed to the internet for like much more than the people of the past were, to much more people, to much more problems around the world, and it kind of creates that empathy in them. And you can see it in the way that they act and how they treat people and how they accept people, and it's like I think like a good like example of it. I know it sounds really silly, but like in the film 22 Jump Street, there's a scene where one of them is like attempting to be a homophobic bully because they thought it was cool back when they were in high school, and then everyone's like, no, that's not cool anymore, that guy's gay, like why are you doing this? And like he's the uncool one now.
I actually saw some kids outside of my my flat doing that. They were all kind of messing with each other and teasing each other, and then one of them just turned around and was like, she's being homophobic, everybody, she's a homophobe. And it just seemed like this big group of lads, and then they were just making fun of their mate because she was being homophobic. It was brilliant.
That's amazing.
But on the topic of gendering everything, my mum has a really good take on it, about gender reveal parties, which she finds infuriating. It's the last time that someone mentioned a gender reveal party, she was like, they can have the gender reveal party in 30 years, keep me posted.
There's like a good Monty Python joke for that, wasn't there? Whereas they're like delivering the baby and the mum is like, oh, what's the gender? And it's like, a bit early to be imposing gender roles, don't you think? Yeah. Oh, I have opinions about gender reveal parties.
Yeah, especially when they like result in wildfires.
Which is all too common, honestly. Like, I think if it's like the Barbra Streisand effect, like if you had just small parties, almost no one would care. But the fact that they have caused like wildfires and several deaths, like how have you messed up this badly? Right. Well, thanks for joining us, Duncan. It's been lovely talking to you. Yeah, hope to see you all next time, and we'll have some more conversations.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.